Welcome back to Your Story Medicine. Today, I am with Mimi Young, who is a Taiwanese-Canadian spirit communicator and shamanic occultist, and the founder of Ceremonie, an esoteric brand focused on imparting ancient and practical wisdom so clients can actively receive support from spirits and healing energies, break negative patterns, and celebrate their path. Mimi works at the intersection of core shamanism, ancestral wisdom, dream work, chaos magic, and other Chinese mystic practices to communicate with the unseen, offering education and mentorship, private readings, and skincare and aura care. Because why do one thing when you can do all the things? Hi, Mimi. First question I'd love to start off with is I like to call them roses. If you can offer a rose of what it is you are celebrating about yourself today.
First of all, thank you so much for having me, June McKay. What am I celebrating about myself today? I am celebrating that I'm thinking only in the moment right now, which is, of course, spending time with you, which something I've been looking forward to. Yay. And not thinking too far. And I feel that all our experiences they just experience, the experiences themselves wind up experiencing a heightened sweetness when we can just be here truly now and nothing more.
Yeah, because I mean, who expected a pandemic? Who expected so much of the magic that has unfolded like within the chaos? And so I'm really excited to learn more about what chaos magic is, and also how is it that we can turn whatever experiences or adversities we are having into, like, alchemizing it into our dharma, into our medicine, right? And anyways, I know that this is so much of what you dive into with your offerings, with your medicine, but if we can take away all of your titles for a moment, how is it that you would describe what it is you do?
I love that. I love how you asked. Let's just, if we were to strip away all the titles, I would say that I am someone who is completely in love with the three-dimensional reality and also completely in love with the invisible, non-dimensional, multi-dimensional, fluid dimensional reality too. And it's being able to have one foot in each of these realities that makes life really fun. And I would say that's really, it summarizes what it is that I do. So it summarizes what it is that I do from a work or a career perspective, but also just my life. I mean, that's how I cook. When I cook, I invite the ancestor to show up in my kitchen. That's how I parent. When, every morning we talk about dreams, and we talk about the ancestors and other spirits, and maybe, even the household spirit that may show up on one of our laps when we're having a meal, and when we're talking about a dream, or talking about what happened to those missing socks, and all these sorts of things. So yeah, I would say that's really how I would summarize what it is that I do and who it is that I am.
I'm like chuckling because I'm like, oh my God, that missing sock. So you're saying that it's not me, that I didn't misplace it, that a spirit could have probably like took it and put it in the kitchen cupboard.
It does happen. Yeah. I mean, of course we do lose things as humans, or misplace things. But yeah, things can be moved around in the home. Things can go missing in the home. Things can mysteriously, break or actually repair themselves. Oftentimes through, like home-based spirits, domestic spirits. They are real.
Is this something that you grew up with? So tell us more about your ancestral lineage. You mentioned that you are of Taiwanese descent, but you currently live in Canada. And I'm curious, how has your upbringing influenced your path today?
That's a big question.
I know.
So with my Taiwanese lineage, I come from homes, like I'm referring to my parents, their homes that practice Buddhism. And within Buddhism, there's fairly, at least in the Taiwanese experience, there's a fair amount of ancestral reverence that's tied into the Buddhist practice, as well as animistic-based practices and animistic-based beliefs. On top of that, there's Taoist principles that are woven. It shows up in Buddhism, but it shows up in the everyday, particularly through food and through seasonal cycles. So Taoist informing what we now understand as traditional Chinese medicine. And even though my parents were not TCM practitioners, it was just a commonplace thing to talk about the elements, to talk about how foods have energies that could potentially heal us and certainly inform us of what it is that we need. And so that was sort of the background that I came from. Now, at the same time, living in Canada and being someone who is, visibly not white, it also presented new challenges for, us as an immigrant family. Particularly this idea of where do we fit in? Where do we fit in socially? What is a spiritual home? And so my mother actually wound up converting to evangelical Christianity. So I also have all of that stuff through my upbringing. So I would say that having that Sunday school experience and having studied extensively in the Old and the New Testament, and really taking on the doctrine of evangelical Christianity also provided a lot of information, particularly just through contrast. For instance, they don't believe in animism. So that really, as I grew up, I understood how I was different, what was different. And this idea that when you move on, like when you die in the three-dimensional, you're not coming back here, because of course with Buddhist, it's always about reincarnation. It's always returning back to the earth, always being able to keep in connection with those who still remain here in the 3D, which is not something that really is talked about at all. It's not what is taught. It's not what is really makes up the Christian belief system. So going back to that original question, is these were all the things that informed me, and these were all the things to a certain degree that helped shape who I am today, needing to sort of navigate through it all, learning how to identify what it is that I want to include as part of who I am, and what parts that just have to be shed and left to decompose and perhaps feed my who I am as a being, but no longer necessarily coming with me in that same capacity.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because I feel like this is something that I personally still struggle with. Sometimes I will get emails or people in my DMs who tell me I need Jesus.
Oh, I get that too, a lot.
Yeah.
Or that, or worse things, because I believe in something that's not compatible with theirs.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I don't get that from any other religion. It is specifically Christians who show up in my DMs, like telling me that I need to be saved, or in my inbox. And similar to you, I actually grew up partially with a Christian upbringing as well. My parents are Buddhists. I was born and raised as a Buddhist, but because we didn't have family here in the United States, they had to find a place that provided childcare for me, to where they could go to work early in the morning and pick me up late in the evening. And public schools didn't have that. So I ended up actually going to a private Christian school, where I was the first to get dropped off at 6:00 a.m. and the last to get picked up at 6:00 p.m. My parents' other immigrant friends who are Thai that happen to be Buddhists recommended this to my family. But what they didn't know was how much indoctrination I was experiencing. My teachers would tell me that I would be saved, and yet my parents were going to go to hell because they didn't accept Jesus Christ into their hearts. And I grew up very confused, wondering whether my mom would go to heaven or hell, or my dad, because they weren't Christian. And it wasn't until I actually left that school because of severe bullying, where I ended up at a public school where I, at an age where I could walk myself to school, and I learned, wow, there's many different spiritual practices. And how is that we can honor and uplift one another versus shame each other? And so I find it very interesting that it's like you were able to hold on to some of these practices, and then do it full time today. So I like, and being somebody of the Asian diaspora, what was that like for you to commit to this path?
I think for me, it was a bit of a no-brainer because I attended church for a number of years. In fact, I even met my partner there, and
Wow.
we sort of did the church thing for a while, where I did the church thing for a while, and then I met him and continued doing the church thing for a while. And what was interesting was, like, I couldn't pinpoint what it was during, but now leaving that environment, I now know exactly what was happening. Is you are told that the thoughts and the feelings that you have are invalid. You're told that if you have any thoughts that are not consistent with, let's say, that local church's belief, that you were being sinful. And so if you were being sinful, it was just like constantly me trying to override what it is that I was feeling and override what it was that I was thinking, to the point where you just wind up allowing yourself to be brainwashed. I was indoctrinated, and then I reinforced that indoctrination internally as well. And you do that long enough, you completely lose touch with who you are. You completely lose touch with your roots. You just are not stable as a being anymore. And it really led to essentially someone who was, I felt like I was a bit of a shell. Like I had a form on the outside, and maybe on paper it looked good, or maybe on the outside it looked good, but it felt really vacant on the inside. I was deeply, deeply unhappy, and experienced a whole lot of depression and anxiety, and absolutely zero trust in my own voice. And it wasn't until I realized, actually, one of the best things to do is to actually believe in darkness and embrace darkness as a form of information, because we all have it. We're all made up of it too. We're not all just light here.
Yes.
And by embracing that, I was able to be honest again. And that was really the big thing. It was like living this life of lies and denial and suppression, and avoidance. And so I got to the point where it was just such an obvious choice for me. And so it was just like that daily choice of, do I want to be honest with myself? Because it is through being honest and embracing and integrating all these aspects of light and shadow, so to speak, that I can actually tap into my own magic and trust my voice and trust who I am as a person.
Were you somebody who grew up in a family that wanted you to follow a different path? What was the reaction from your family when you made a commitment to be essentially a full-time witch?
I know. So my dad never converted to Christianity. He remained culturally a Buddhist, but he never really practiced Buddhism. He has always been interested in the esoteric, and mainly actually it was through his studies in martial arts, and that's why he actually retained it. And he's always been quite tapped into his intuition, but he's never spiritualized it. He's never made it this thing that becomes a full-blown ritual where you have to go to a place every week and announce to everybody else that's exactly like everyone's mimicking everyone else, trying to look like a certain kind of spiritual person. He wasn't into that. So he really was just like, you want to do this? Great. If you don't want to do this, great. Like, it's just like he really didn't care. It was my mother. It was my mother that I think it affected her quite deeply when I decided to walk away from church. And to this day, it's still actually a very uncomfortable conversation, because when we do engage in those conversations, I tend to feel that she's still coming from a place of evangelism, how everyone must, like you had said, believe in Jesus, or, lest you be cast into hell and burn forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that you also have your own online business school that approaches entrepreneurship from a more decolonial perspective, one where we are in tune with the elements, and one where we can build a team that goes beyond people, but actually calls in our guides in the unseen realm. So I want to dig into where you created this, and also where does God fit in all of this? Because I know for myself, it's like, okay, I've been slowly starting to use the word God more, but of course there's still this contraction in my body of like, oh, people are going to think that when I say God, I only mean this God. So I would just love to hear your own take on that, since you have also been one to have been exposed to both Buddhism and Christianity, like me.
Yeah. So God what's interesting, at least in chaos magic, is energies grow and expand when you feed them. And when you no longer feed them, the energies will sort of follow through on a cycle. The cycle essentially is quite universal. You look at, the cycle of seasons, the cycle of let's say a menstrual cycle, a seed cycle. It's all very similar. There's a generation and a degeneration. I'm oversimplifying, obviously, but that's essentially what it is. God as an energy can be that. So when you feed a God, it will generate. And when you allow that energy to continue, it will eventually go through a degeneration. But a degeneration is not bad, and nor is it's not really death. It actually just becomes, it returns to that yin state of potential, so that something else can come through in the following generative cycle. So how I talk about this in business is I think it's important to talk about each of our composition. This is very Taoist when we're talking about, which compositions are we made up of? So are we made up of metal or wood or water or earth or whatever? And essentially, when we understand the functions and the personalities of each of these elements, then we understand what our gifts are. And when we know what our gifts are, then we can embrace them. And we can also outsource perhaps the ones where they're not our natural gifts. And that's really where the collaboration can occur. I mean, it will be unique to everyone. And also sometimes we think we don't have a gift, but when we discover through our chart, our natal chart, that wow, we actually do have a lot of this particular element. But why is it that we don't actually consider that as part of who we are? Why is it we actually almost consider it foreign to us? And that's when a lot of people will understand that perhaps there has been some type of indoctrination in the past that has asked them to silence or squash or make that part of themselves small. And so, we're talking about decolonizing. A lot of it is decolonizing perspective, our own internal perspective of things, of ourselves, our perspectives of how businesses or projects should be formed. Even just this idea, we talked about this very briefly before recording, is this idea of a solitary witch. Well, no solitary witch, even if the witch doesn't belong to a coven, that solitary witch is never working alone. by definition, witch means that you are working with energies, you're working with spirits. So when a witch is working, even if it's a solitary one, they are inviting perhaps ancestors, perhaps land-based spirits, perhaps gods and other types of divine beings and so forth into their work. And so in my Evoking Your Business and Project series, I talk about this. I talk about how do you, even if you right now are simply operating as a one-person show, how do you do it where you don't feel alone? How do you do it where you can invite those beings in? And I call them your cosmic, to basically to build a cosmic board of directors, where you go into meetings, and I say this, I do this all the time. I'll go into my office and it looks, and I'll tell people, like I'll tell my family, I'm going into a meeting and like, it's me, like physically in the room, and no one else can, like no one can see anything in the room other than me and maybe my desk. But I'm actually talking to the spirits that show up in the room, and then we make business decisions just together.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about my days in nonprofit work and just needing to have a board of directors in order to make these important decisions. And then sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, there's just so many voices and there's like too many cooks in the kitchen. And I know one reason why I chose to embark on this path of sacred entrepreneurship is because I needed to learn how to trust myself. I needed to learn how to trust my own voice versus feeling like I needed all of these different opinions to tell me what to do. And yet, it is in the stillness, it is in the solitude. Most of the time, my downloads actually come when I am in nature without any Wi-Fi, without any books, without any distractions, where the voices start to show up. And I'm like, oh, how come this voice wasn't here when I was sitting in front of my computer trying to like strategize my way into what my next offering was going to be? And I have an altar myself as well. And so it's the first thing I tell all of my clients to do whenever we begin our work together is to create your space, to call in your guides, to call in an ancestor that you are walking this path with, whether or not they are of blood lineage, like chosen ancestors as well, remembering that the work that you are doing is not just of your own, that you are carrying on a legacy and you are creating a legacy for the next generation where you will one day become an ancestor on somebody else's altar. So what are the seeds that you are planting, or what is it that you are watering that has been carried on from somebody else who, or something else that is now in the spirit realm? And so I'm laughing because of the relatability and also the challenges of having an actual board in the physical realm.
Yeah. And I love when you said that one day we will be on the altar. Yeah. For the next generation, whether if we have biological children or not. Yeah. All of us, we have a legacy.
Yeah. And so I know that in your mentorship, you support people with being able to birth an offering that can either be something that is like physical, like a product, or more like service-based. And just for me, it even sounds weird to say that because it's like I know that you do dream work as well, and like shamanic readings, which we'll dive deeper into. But I think it's important to name that many people who identify as witches are often experimenting with like plant medicine, and that's not always like ayahuasca and mushrooms. By the way, I've said this before, plant medicine includes ginger and turmeric. Okay. But absolutely, a lot of your roots began in skincare. Mm-hmm. And so tell us about how that came to be, and then your expansion into the interwebs.
So I created the skincare and aura care line mainly as a response to my own needs. So I launched the business shortly after my second child was born. And, you know, I was still breastfeeding, and I just didn't, it felt really important. I mean, it felt even really important when I had my first child, but the importance really became heightened with my second, that I really wanted to put only ingredients that was truly honoring to me. So this is like beyond clean ingredients. Like we're talking about ones that are also energetically aligned. And so that led me to create a few potions, so to speak, more for my own internal consumption. My own, sorry, not internal consumption, my own personal consumption. But through that, I think people really noticed. And so a few friends and my mother even, they were asking if they could also have it too. And so that actually was what was the initial offering. It was something that was incredibly grassroots within my own people, so to speak. And one thing sort of led to another, and, you know, a whole collection came out of it. It was never intended to be, like I said, like a traditional skincare line. For me, I wanted the performance factor in there, but even more so, I wanted it to be in a way that felt very energetically aligned. I wanted something that supported my intuitions, that supported my emotions, and that really helped me stay grounded and connected at the same time. Because I think in a lot of spiritual circles there's this idea that when you're connected, that you lose touch a bit with like the 3D reality, and you're just kind of floating away a bit. I didn't like that. I wanted something that was very etheric and without form, but also something that was very formed, very physical and grounded. And then, of course, through that, I was just, honestly, what happens is that you do something and you do something well, people start asking you questions. And then if you start paying attention, the questions are often similar. And then it just sort of thought, maybe I should just start offering small little one-off workshops. And they were just workshops. They weren't courses. They weren't full-blown series and mentorships. They were just small, you know, under 2-hour workshops. But that grew too. And I saw that I was meeting a need that people had. People also want to experience that connection with the unseen. And so, and especially for people who are not necessarily ready to immerse themselves completely in it, it's really nice to refer to that more through the physical first, to use, let's say, common plants as a way to springboard them from the common plants. And also now let's take that leap and get to know these common plant spirits. And so that's essentially what helped prompt the transition from 3-dimensional potions alone to potions plus the educational offerings that I have.
Yeah, which has now blossomed into so much more. You've been featured on Goop, you've been featured on all of these other platforms. Like, is this an intention that you set for yourself? Like, I'm going to be featured on these media outlets one day? Or is it something that just, yeah.
No, absolutely not. The spirits have always said your job, Mimi, is to connect people to spirits. Yes. So, you know, they've always been really clear on that. And I just said yes to the ride. You know, it's one of those things where maybe on the outside, it looks probably just like just like any other brand that has been featured on some of these mainstream channels. But at the end of the day, it was never that intention. I actually frankly don't even really believe in the functions of PR very much. And I'm sorry for you listeners if you are in PR, because that's just, to me, the best PR, if you really want to talk about PR, are people sharing how their lives have changed. Just people living their lives connected to a greater reality, and seeing that return to who they truly are, and that cognizance that they indeed are magical. That is the PR. You know, whether if it's like validated, so to speak, and say validated with air quotes, by some high profile media channel, like that's it's great that it's there, but that's actually really not what makes my work satisfying. It's seeing people experience dramatic change. And that change is that return to who they truly are. It's not like they become somebody new, it's they become somebody old again.
Yeah. So when I got on the Red Table Talk, honestly, it was not something that was planned at all. And you can go back and listen to that episode, right? What was it? What was the episode called again? Night Blooming Serious. Um, and people are like, okay, did you have a PR team? And it's like, no, I literally was just like in a moment of grief. And suddenly this opportunity came about. And it wasn't even like, oh, I'm going to be on the Red Table Talk. It was, oh, I have an opportunity to share what it is I'm moving through with the intention that these words and my experience are going to touch at least one person, to let them know that they are not alone, because this path can feel incredibly lonely, as you mentioned, which is why it is so important that we share our story, right? Because like shame dies in places where our stories are told. And then this is where we create these communities that we've prayed for, that we've longed for, so that we can heal our lineage and become the ones we've been praying for. And so I I feel like there's a lot of stories that we may tell ourselves as well, that prevent us from being able to step into our medicine, like, oh, well, I'm not a witch, or I don't have my degree or certification, or I'm too old. I'm not like Mimi. Like she looks good. She has her stuff together. Um, or maybe people who may fall into the allure, which we see happen a lot in this industry, of like, I want to be like you. Therefore, if I invest in your stuff, then I'll get the same downloads and the codes and the manifestations as you. What would you say to somebody who's telling themselves those stories?
I am a firm believer that we just need to be ourselves. I know that sounds so, like I remember my kindergarten teacher telling us that. but yeah, like just it's when we get to be ourselves, it feels good, right? Because you're not twisting and trying to fit yourself into a box that's not to your natural shape. So it feels good. It feels really relieving and affirming and joyous. And B, when we get to be ourselves, we get to naturally offer our gifts. And ultimately, any business, any project, anything, the world needs you as Jumaque, not you pretending to be somebody else, not you pretending to be whoever you maybe really admire and find inspiring on IG. Ultimately, it's who you being yourself that winds up being irreplaceable. If you are going to be someone else, then of course you're irreplaceable because that someone else already exists. So to me, that seems redundant. And when it's redundant, then you're actually decreasing diversity. And ultimately, what makes this planet beautiful and sustainable is actually the diversity. So I think, energetically speaking, spiritually speaking, physically speaking, it's not about being different for different sake, but just being who you are naturally as your default. And that default, it sounds so plain or so vanilla, but that default is the most important part of who you are, because that's who you are truly without any additional embellishments. So yeah, and I think we, it's true that Instagram and social media in general, because everyone's putting their best foot forward, or mostly, it can become really seductive. It's easy to fall into the trap that other people maybe have an easier life or a more, put together life or all those things. Yeah. And honestly, I don't really fit in the wellness box, right? A, I'm not white. B, I'm over 40, right? Like, it's like, C, I don't have that like perfect yoga bod or whatever it is that they, at least in the yoga community at one point, that was a real big thing, is looking like a yoga instructor. Like, what is that even supposed to mean, for goodness sakes? Or even, and I eat meat. That's the other thing. It's like a lot of people seem to think that it's deeply problematic if you're spiritual, and also like, fries and gravy, and the gravy actually contains like some type of like meat base. But like, I love meat-based gravies. Like, it just really does taste amazing to me. And I know it doesn't sound very spiritual to say that I like French fries, but I just do.
I love, girl, me at 11 p.m. last night. Okay, no judgment. And like me eating these Pocky sticks while on this call.
You're having Pocky right now.
My fellow Asians, you get it.
Yeah. It's and that's the thing, food. So in my culture, I didn't actually grow up eating a whole lot of beef, because in a lot of Buddhist homes, you don't eat beef. It's, the cow is considered a really sacred animal. And even though we did eat beef, we just didn't eat that much of it. And also, from a practical perspective, beef is expensive. So growing up, it was just like not a meat that we often ate, but we ate a lot of fish. And part of that is because, I'm Taiwanese. And so like that fish is in abundance in Taiwan.
Yeah.
But I remember a lot of people, at least growing up, people look down on fish. And, it's not like we ate all sorts of fish. salmon was not the fish that we ate because salmon is expensive. So we ate the fish that probably no one really cared about because it was cheap. But I remember friends would say I ate weird food, smelly food, all sorts of things. So, well, why am I talking about this? Because food, and as you're nibbling your Pocky, food it's so vital to this idea of diversity, where like eating many different types of things and eating it many different ways. And we're not all focused on one thing, meaning that's the thing that defines wellness. That's the thing that defines spirituality. Like it's okay to eat a pan-fried, let's say tilapia, and that is healthy. It's not just green juice, right? And like, I think we see this all over Instagram. Like you have this like perfect green juice kitchen where you're just having smoothies and juice all day long. But that's like modeled as healthy. So I think for me, I didn't want to do that because it feels unnatural. I grew up drinking green juice. Like why would I drink that? Like I have no problem with juicing. I'm just saying, but that's not my ancestral food. That's not how I ground. That's not what I place on my altar. Imagine me offering my green juice on the altar. He would probably be like, what the fuck is that? Like
exactly. Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Like you should have just given me the whole damn fruit.
Exactly. Anyway.
I love it. Yeah. Yes, we often talk about the ancestors we are becoming, and also staying grounded in this 3D realm, the reality that before we become an ancestor, actually not for everybody, for many of us before we become an ancestor, though I believe that we are all just reincarnated ancestors, that we are elders in the making. And our culture is obsessed with holding on to youth. And I think about what it was like in the motherland, how our elders we would hold with such deep reverence. They were the storytellers of our communities. They were the wise sage. And I'm just like, I feel both like chills in my body as well as grief when I think about this, because I am in a very tender place right now where the reality is hitting me that, yes, I am my mother's daughter. I'm the daughter to both of my parents who are aging, and they are immigrants to this country. We don't have our rituals that we had in the motherland. Like my grandfather's funeral, he was 98 years old. It was a grand ceremony with over 2,000 people. And this was a man that didn't grow up with the financial wealth. He was a farmer. And yet his kindness impacted so many people. He didn't even have a cell phone. I'm like, who are all of these people? And I just remember thinking like, wow, when I leave this world, or when my parents leave this world, when his daughter, my mother, leaves this world, how is it that I can also throw her a grand party like this versus that we dread, where everybody is wearing black, and where it's like, oh, you can't, don't cry. It's okay. It's like, no, my grief is a prayer. But I'm sharing this because so many of us are afraid of aging, right? Even like whenever I try to have conversations with my sister, she's my only sister. And that's another thing. I don't know if it's like this in your family. It's like my grandparents had like 10 kids, and then their kids didn't have any more than 3 kids, because they had kids to work on the farm. And my mom was like, I don't want to be a farmer. Peace. I'm going to America to pursue this dream. And instead of living in a hut with like 10 or 20 other people with no locked doors, I'm my dream is to live in the suburbs and to have my own room, and my children will have their own room. No wonder why I'm in business today, creating community, right? Because I'm like,
oh my goodness,
that. But okay, so so much of the work that you do dives into the shadows, dives into those parts of ourselves that we are afraid of confronting. And I think about the colonization of even aging, the adultism, the ageism. And you shared a very powerful post that was in response to people who said, you look so good for being 40. And as somebody who is, oh my God, so weird to say, in their mid 30s, recently single, I would have these stories of like, oh, is it too late for me? But oh my God, I feel like the most youthful and vibrant in my life right now. But let's explore that. Like, how is it that we can even decolonize the ways that we are approaching age, grief, death? That's a whole episode within itself.
Oh, for sure. I feel that aging has been made to look like an illness.
Yeah.
And, the way to avoid aging is to buy these, I don't know, these night creams.
If I buy your cream, if I buy the Aura Care, that skincare line, then I'll be able to hold on to my youth, right?
In fact, actually, the complete opposite, not from the external perspective, but the Aura Care is not for skin. It's designed for your actual aura or the space that you dwell in. But the skincare is designed, the quote unquote anti-aging cream, so to speak. It's actually a pro-aging cream. It's designed to help one. It will nourish your skin. It'll hydrate. It'll do all the things that a good cream should do, for skin with sensitivities or a skin that's experiencing changes in elasticity and such. But really, what the magic of that cream, the one that I'm thinking of in particular, it's actually going to shift one's perspective towards themselves in regards to aging, in regards to ageism. They will refer to themselves in the mirror with a sense of compassion, a sense of excitement to age, and to no longer see aging as a pejorative thing. Those plants are there to assist in experience that is much more, we talked about this idea of like body positivity. Body positivity is not just embracing your waist size, right? It's embracing wrinkles, embracing a change in one's face over the years. It embraces age. I mean, why is age seen as, we all know that the most valuable things that are old things. Antiques are valuable. Old growth trees are valuable. Yeah. Why is it that humans, particularly those who identify as women, are seen as having a short lifespan, or a short shelf life of value? It's like, because that being is fertile, and after those ages of fertility, then that being is no longer of value. But we're looking at that body from a production-based perspective. Like, we're not machines, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. Decolonizing ageism, decolonizing the idea that the body is meant to be productive. No, that does not apply. We're not products of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, especially being in business. I hear this from my students and just from everybody who is afraid to expand, or even the fear of abundance and money. I'm going to have to work harder if I want to be able to get there, right? And I'm sure that you may be experiencing the opposite, right? Which is polar opposite of what we've been taught growing up here. You're in Canada, I'm in the United States. Something tells me that maybe the narrative is very similar, especially if we're growing up within capitalism.
Oh, it's pretty darn similar. We have a smaller population compared to the US, but I would say, and we're a little bit more socialist in some respects, but it's pretty capitalistic regardless. Yeah. And I would say that people tend to confuse these things around having to work hard and being accountable. Like, and how do I put this? I do think we need to show up to our work. Like, I mean, like really show up, like holistically show up. And showing up means being responsible, making choices that are for the best of the situation and for all involved. And showing up also means saying, hey, I'm tired. Like, I'm going to go take a break.
Yeah.
There's this fine line between it. It's almost like by saying, oh, we need to be more compassionate with ourselves, and there's this potential bypassing of responsibility, and bypassing of intent, and bypassing of outcome. And yet, like, I still do believe it's important to totally show up and be responsible for what it is that one does. But it has to be done in a way that is also realistic and can support longevity of that task, right? Because it's like, fine, if you put in an aggressive amount of hours one week, you can't expect to do that again the following week and the week after that and that, right? Like, it's just, that's not sustainable. But that has nothing to do, in my opinion, with working hard.
Yeah. Ooh, I love how you said, like, do we say to the mighty cedar, a radiant magnolia, an elegant willow, that they look good for being several decades old? We know that the older, right? We know that the older a tree is, the more precious it is. Oh, yes.
Thank you for reading that out loud. Thank you.
Yeah. And I've never heard anybody say pro aging, like, because everything we see is about anti-aging. Right. And I'm in a place where I want to get more comfortable having these conversations about growing older and about death, especially for me being Asian American, where this conversation is taboo. And as I mentioned, it's I don't know what the death rituals look like, other than like the boring ones that I've seen here that are really not, I mean, it's just like, yeah, where do we hold space to go into those shadows, but recognize within it is also a safety, a comfort, and a warm blanket. And it doesn't have to be something that we fear. So that's what's been heavy on my heart lately. And I know that you work very deeply with the dreams as a part of the unseen realm. So tell us a little bit more about how is it that we can utilize our dreams, dig into our dreams to explore those parts of ourselves that may be dormant. And I guess also, when is it the time to seek guidance for those interpretations?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say that I recommend everyone to befriend their dreams. And I use the word befriend because I view the dream life as, and learning from the dreams, to be deeply relational. So it's not about trying to dominate the dream by saying, I've got you figured out, and this is the one and only interpretation, but it's being open and receptive to hear what may be coming through during the dream and maybe even post dreaming. So this is in our waking life. The idea is there's messages that are coming through, and whether if the messages are coming through your ancestors or other spirit allies, or they're coming through your body, because a lot of times our body will produce dreams, especially if they're body-based dreams. That, like, if you ever have things happening in a certain part of your body or whatever, like, those are body-based dreams. That's the body talking to you, less so ancestors. I would pay attention, and it's meant to be something that is done on a daily basis. I think the other piece is, a lot of times people think, and this is for folks who feel that they don't dream.
Yes.
Let's define what a dream is. I think that may even be helpful. So a dream, this is how I define it. a dream is any impression. So it doesn't actually have to be a narrative. It doesn't have to have like a very distinct beginning, middle, and end that with like a tidy little bow on the top. It doesn't have to be a story. It could be a word, it could be a feeling, it could be a taste, it could be a sound. It could be just this feel, like this impression that you get, and we all do get them. So I would say begin by paying attention to that during the dream if you're lucid, and if you're not lucid, just pay attention to how you feel when you awaken. There's usually a little bit of what I like to call like an aftertaste from a dream that sort of lingers, and then note it down. The other thing is, for me, what's really supportive is going to bed with the intention of actually dreaming. So I tend to encourage clients, and certainly for myself, I tend to practice what I call good, clean dream hygiene. So I'm not watching YouTube up until the last second before I go to sleep. Like I create some space where I'm not being imparted loads of images and loads of stimulation. I give myself some downtime where it's idle, so to speak, where I'm not functional in any way other than just being idle. And it's really nice actually to be idle. We don't really do that very much anymore as a modern culture and as adults. And when you do that, you actually sleep better, like because you basically are not blasting your neural networks with all this information that then of course your brain is trying to make sense of it later on. It's like you're giving your brain a nice steady descent into dream while you're still awake, and you're making space. You're making space around the idea of going to sleep, resting, and perhaps receiving something from or through your body. So I do think that dream hygiene is really helpful for that.
Oops, hold on, pause.
I tend to
You're cutting off a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
I see several bars. Can you hear me?
Yes. So dream hygiene.
Dream hygiene. Yeah. So I do find having space before bed to be, do you want me to talk or not talk?
Hold on. Okay. Yes. Dream hygiene.
Yeah. So I do find that having that space before bed where I'm being more idle and I'm not being hyper functional, I'm not thinking about what I have to do tomorrow morning and all those things, to be really supportive of having dreams, because you're basically creating space for the dreams to come through. And then the other bit is making sure that the actual sleeping space, like for me, I try in my bed to only sleep and maybe do other intimate things, but I don't work in bed. Like I'm not, I'm not responding to emails on my laptop in bed. And just simply because then I view the bed almost like an altar. And it's like a dream altar. So it's like a dedicated space for some really beautiful magic, intuitive magic, and magic that is completely beyond your control, really. Because it's like when the dreams come, they come. It's not like you know ahead of time that you're going to dream or not. So yeah, I would say that those are supportive. And then you had another question relating to dreams,
like when is it? Yeah, when is time to actually reach out to somebody with that? With support around that?
Yeah, I would say that definitely spend time trying to make sense of it first. I always encourage that. And there's different ways to approach it. Of course, I would just lean into your intuition and see what your intuition is saying. But I would say that after you've given the space around making sense, making meaning from the dream, and you're still stumped, then yeah, I would say that's a good time to perhaps approach some tools. So it could be tarot. You could ask tarot questions. You could, if there's another type of practice that could support some type of divinatory practice. I do offer dream interpretations, like as an actual offering. So there's always that as a possibility. But you don't necessarily need to speak.
Oops, hold on. You're breaking off again.
Sometimes
hold on. Repeat
like
one more time. Okay. Say you don't have to. Start from there.
Okay. You don't necessarily have to, book a reading with me or even consult tarot or, throw some bones. None of that's really necessary, especially in the beginning. I think the most important thing is to sit with it and to figure out how it feels, what those messages may mean. Go through a process of inquiry. And if you're still like, yeah, I don't know, or I have a feeling it's this, but I would really love something external of me to confirm or affirm, then that's when it's helpful to maybe pull some cards. Or like I said, always welcome to book a dream interpretation session where we can really deep dive and explore it together.
Yeah, and I know that something that has helped me is journaling, because both you and I know that spelling is a spell. Words cast spells. And I know for myself, if I don't write it out, then it didn't exist. I'm going to forget about it. A lot of the ritual that I do is writing as my future self. What is it that she would say? And then doing the work to embody her as if she is already here. So I also know that you have your upcoming retreat for people who want to dig deeper into spell work, literally. That's what we're calling it. So yes. Share with us more about how people can be it's like, tell us more about how people can become a witch alongside you.
Yeah. So the retreat is called Writing with Spirit. And it's set for January 21st to 24th, 2022. It'll be an intimate group of us. We'll be on Bowen Island in BC. And it's meant to be, this beautiful, cold, wintry time where we can just snuggle up indoors with our tea, with some paper and a pen, or perhaps if it's a laptop that one prefers. And it's really just approaching written word as active spell work. And it's meant to, there's a reason why I named it Writing with Spirit. It's meant to be collaborative with the spirits in one's life. So that could include ancestors, that could include perhaps a god or, goddess, or some type of divine being that one reveres. It could be nature spirits or other types of spirits that one has a relationship with. And the idea is, because it's in January and it's meant to, I'm not a January 1st kind of person because I go by the lunar calendar. So this approaching Lunar New Year will be on February 1st. So I wanted to have this before the Lunar New Year arrived. So January 21st to 24th just really felt like the right time where we can dive in. And this retreat is not meant to be people who love writing necessarily. It could also be people who really don't like writing, because the fact is writing and communicating is something that's deeply human. It's just like we are communicative by nature, and there's a reason for it. So this is really meant to be using writing as a platform, as a conduit to really move energy that's within us, so that we can witness ourselves, move energy out of us into the three-dimensional world, so we can maybe activate certain energies and put it in that generative motion. And also a way to really hold ourselves accountable. Writing can be very healing, can be really cathartic. It's not meant to be something that we need to post or display. Maybe at the end of the day, all you do at the end is just tuck it into a folder and that's done. But the fact is we as people don't really carve out space to do this type of work typically. Unless someone is holding it. It's hard to say, okay, I'm just going to block off this weekend and not respond to my cell phone or anything. But when you are, set on this gorgeous island in the deep old growth forest, in these gorgeous, you have to go on my Instagram and see some of the photos like of these beautiful cottages, you can't help but want to be indoors and maybe spend some time outdoors too, and just be. And then of course, while being, we can talk about writing. We can talk about ways to allow that magic to come through writing.
Wow. So you're telling me that I'm not going to walk away as a best-selling author?
You could, but I think we have such an expectation of ourselves that we must perform, that we must somehow experience excellence and perfection. And I feel that that will defeat the process of this kind of work, because magic is not asking for perfection. Magic is just asking for us to show up. Magic is just asking for ourselves, like our real selves. You know, and it's here, I'll share with you a really just an example of what I mean about this is the kind of work I do. And this is the stuff that I experience on a daily basis in my own personal life, not just in my work life. So I had some questions. This happened maybe about 2 months ago. So I had some questions about something that I was consulting the I Ching with. And so I was consulting the I Ching, and the I Ching was giving me a different answer every time. And it was because I normally don't ask the same question more than once, but it was because the first time it was so unclear that I wound up thinking maybe I didn't ask it clearly enough. So I asked it again, slightly differently. Second time, same thing. And then I kind of got a bit frustrated. And so then I said, what do you want? I said that to the I Ching. I just, because the I Ching's alive and is a being, I said, what do you want? And I was so humbled by the answer. The I Ching said, thank you for finally asking me that. And that was when I was just like these beings, these very alive beings that are speaking through divination tools, or perhaps the spirits themselves of these divination tools, they are alive. And they long to be in relationship with us. They long to be dancing with us and being called forth, not as our personal genies, because I think so often we do that to them. We exploit them. You know, I grab my tarot deck and it's like my personal genie. Like, no. Like, we get it all wrong. Like, I still do this sometimes. I catch myself. And this is that we've been so indoctrinated that humans are on the top and everything else is at our beck and service, right? Like, it's wrong. Anyway, so when the being through the I Ching said that to me, I was just like, I actually thought it was the most romantic thing, because it was a spirit saying, I want to know you and I want you to know me. And I want us to create magic together. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff that I'm going to be holding space for at the writing retreat, because I think so often we do approach magic as the genie, like our personal genie, and it's not the intention. However.
Oh yeah, that hit me to my core, especially as I think about my elders becoming ancestors, detaching myself from, I mean, you know, like I feel like there's some of us who may have a codependency on our ancestors and the spirit realm as well. So it's something to be very mindful of, and to also recognize that this all comes back to relationships, both in the physical and the unseen realm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whew. Wow. Thank you so much. And it just makes me excited for the ancestor that I'm going to become. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah. As you have been doing this work, what is it that you do to stay grounded? And also, what is it that you've been learning to release?
I stay grounded through food. It's not only the eating, but the cooking as well. So the sourcing of the ingredients and the cooking process, and in particularly ancestral foods. So in this particular season, lots of soups. You know, it's cold outside, and so a lot of times it's soups that incorporate, you know, traditional ingredients. that I grew up with, and, enjoying it myself, but also feeding the family, and knowing that these stories are being passed on. So that's really what keeps us rooted and grounded.
Being in right relationship, right? Being in right relationship, even with the ingredients that we put into our food.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And then, what am I learning? I feel like what am I not learning is really the question. Or sorry, right? Also that too. What am I not releasing? I mean, I feel like every day that's what it's the releasing is the learning. And then when I learn, I also release old information that's not important or no longer relevant, because that's really what I guess decolonizing ultimately is. It's, at least in my experience, the decolonizing is not really learning, it's unlearning. I'm learning a whole lot. So it's, going back to what I shared earlier, is this reminder that the spirits are not our servants, so to speak. They're not, here to manifest my, boss babe dream or whatever it is that people talk about online. I'm talking about all that. Yeah. No, it's not about manifesting the millions. It's not about that. And not to say that money's bad, but I'm just saying that that's not what the spirits are for. And that's not what tarot and those divinatory tools are for. So I'm learning more and more how it may have showed up more subtly in maybe through my language, or maybe just through a brief decision that I may have, a small decision I may have made, that kind of stuff. I'm learning to release more and more.
Yes. And my favorite question of all, if you could speak to yourself as a future ancestor, what is it that you would say in this moment?
I think I would say, I love you and you're doing all right. Because so often, I think that's what I would because all the time, do you not ever think am I doing all right? It's, I just, and my future self is like my mom, right? The older, wiser. And when I say my mom, I mean that internal parent, because I think I have the internalized shadow parent that is asking for all sorts of unrealistic, impossible demands. And then the other one that's sweet. I think that's what I need to remind myself more and more, because ultimately it's that voice that drives us. And so I think I would just keep it really simple. I love myself, or I love you, and that you're doing all right.
Yes. Yeah. We have enough shame in the world. I mean, I feel like I'm really grateful I didn't grow up with the stereotypical tiger mom or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom has, well, I mean, there's definitely been points where she's like, what are you doing? You should just go back to school. I don't know what this stuff that you're, and now she's just just keep going, because she knows that she's going to be an ancestor soon. And she reminds me, you come with nothing, you leave with nothing. You come with nothing, you leave with nothing.
Such an important reminder.
And the immortality will live through the impact that we've made within this lifetime, and to not anticipate whether or not we're going to reincarnate, but to live as if this is the one life that we have. So I thank you so much, Mimi, for sharing this space with me. For our listeners, I know that we covered so much today, because really this was an opportunity for me to learn even more about myself. And I know that I am not alone in a lot of these questions that I have within myself on this journey. I honor you as an elder, as a high compliment, by the way, because you are #elder goals. I'm also not that far away from it. So I'll put her website in the show notes. Look for the pro aging cream, the aura spray, which by the way we didn't even get to dig into, but y'all know, we may not all of us may be able to see energy, but you can clearly feel it. So please protect your energy. And also the mentorship and the writing retreat, especially if you are looking for a space to just right, without any attachment to where it's going to go or what it's going to look like. So, whew, abundance up in here.
Thank you so much, Juma K. It was such a delicious chat.